Afternoon. We're really excited to be back again. Another installment of our webinar series. If it's your first time, we'd love to bring on people in the field with real life cases and real life stories that they can bring to us, and we can unpack those from the lens of a fraud investigation perspective, but also OSINT and everything in between. We tend to give a couple of minutes before we actually jump in. So if you're just sort of joining now and you want to grab a tea or a coffee or a water, then you can definitely do that. And yeah, we look forward to running through this today. It will be an interactive session, so there should be a chat function. If anyone wants to sort of jump on that now, just to let us know that it is working, you can perhaps tell us where you're joining from in the world. I imagine we have a lot of people from Canada and the US, maybe the UK. So yeah, if you could just sort of, I think, put some comments and things in the chat, that'd be great to see where you're joining from, and make sure that's working. Myself, I'm joining from London, London, England. Dave, where are you joining us from today?
Hi, Toby. Good evening, or good morning, or good afternoon, even, wherever in the world you may be. I'm in the beautiful northeast of England today, in Durham.
And Chandra, where are you coming in from today?
From just outside Toronto, Ontario, in Canada. It is, I'd say it's a beautiful sunny day. It's about 30 degrees colder than it was yesterday. That's delightful, but at least it's nice out. So,
yeah, I've been paying particular attention to Toronto weather at the moment because I'm heading out on Friday for a week, and I think there was like, oh, it's like time for patio season, and everyone's going out and enjoying the sun, and now it's gone cold again. So
yeah, we had 2 days of about 34 with the humidity, and then it was about 4 degrees this morning. So
yeah, London is due a heat wave this weekend, and it's a bank holiday. So sadly, I'll be missing that, and maybe heading to the cold again. But we'll see. Maybe I can bring the weather with us as we go in. But we will get started shortly. And yeah, today we're focusing on a fraud case, and digging into, I guess, a range of different angles on that, and how it's evolved. And Chandra, your role in investigating that and picking it apart. We had a preliminary discussion about it the other day, and it's really, really exciting to hear everything that's been going on with it. And we'll hand over to you shortly to begin. But yeah, thank you all for joining. Curtis, great to have you on from Alabama, the US. Yeah, anyone else, keep us that chat coming. Any questions throughout, let us know. But perhaps we begin, Chandra, with maybe a short introduction and jumping into your slides.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Chandra Cureton. I am the principal investigator and fraud analyst with Iridium ITI. My experience and training is in investigations, forensic accounting, cybersecurity, civil engineering, and residential construction. And you'll see that a lot of that will come in to play once we go through this case. To give a bit of a background on what the case is, this is a case example of a real case that I worked on, but all the names and dates and stuff have been changed. The backstory is that a homeowner had a house fire. The house was less than 1,500 square feet. It's a small house, and the reconstruction was covered by insurance. The fire damage to the house was about less than 20% of the square footage, but delays in the process resulted in excessive mold damage. So by the end of it, about 90 to 95% of the house had to be rebuilt. The construction started about a year after the fire, and then there's about 9 months to a year of construction, and the relationship between the homeowner and the builder completely fell apart during that period. It was about another 9 months, 10 months after that the homeowner brought me in, and what they were looking for was that the homeowner and the builder both agreed that money was owed to the builder. The builder had one number. The homeowner worked out their number, which was different. And then the homeowner worked out another number, which was different again. So they had 3 different numbers. Nobody was agreeing on anything. So I was brought in to find out what exactly the number was, to find out who owed what and how much. So jump into the slides there. So I figured this would be pretty straightforward. And I'm laughing because I was completely wrong. I figured I was taking, well, the homeowner came with 2 boxes of paper, like literally 2 banker boxes of paper. And it was printouts of all the email conversations. There were 11 invoices in there, a whole bunch of handwritten notes, the contract. There was a ton of duplicate information, and a lot of it was not relevant to what I had to do. The key part there is that nothing was in digital format. So in this day and age, everything is literally paper. So the first task was to get those, what I thought, just the 11 invoices into Excel. And I am not ashamed to say it took me 3 attempts over about a week to get these 11 invoices into Excel. Not because they were long or complicated, it's because nothing lined up. So from one invoice to another, and within an invoice, the percent complete, the percent work complete wasn't lining up, the percent invoiced wasn't lining up. The descriptions were changing as we were going through the invoices. And as an example, this wasn't what was in the invoice, but as an example to explain it, there'd be something like a line item of framing, house framing. On one invoice, it would be framing. On the next invoice, it'd be framing living room, and then a charge for framing the kitchen, and then framing the bedroom. So what would happen is that framing would be invoiced and paid for, and then framing would be invoiced and paid for again a second and third time. So there was double and triple billing going on in the invoices. There was also one invoice was missing entirely, which was a little difficult to figure out what was going on. The jump from one invoice to the next had a whole lot of gaps in there. And at least one of the invoices was manually altered. I realized that because the builder was using Quicken or QuickBooks to do their bookkeeping and their invoices. And everything added up to a point, and then I got to this one invoice, and basically nothing added up. You could tell that the builder had gone in and changed all the details. So this was the background. This was the quick job that I figured would take a couple of days. And this was the first step into OSINT. I was looking at it thinking, okay, something's missing here. None of the invoices make any sense. I need to do some OSINT to figure out what's the industry standard for the materials. What is the industry standard for the labor costs, the typical scopes of work in similar projects to this, the standard terminology, and what should have been the realistic timelines for this type of work. Once I dug into that, the deeper I got, the more I realized that nothing was looking right. And the major OSINT part that really solidified that something was being manipulated was looking in at the persons of interest. And that's what we're going to cover in this webinar. So in short, basically because of the discrepancies, the modifications, the omissions, the irregularities, and the inconsistencies in the numbers, that led me to do some OSINT to figure out exactly what was going on.
Chandra, before you get into that, hello.
Go back. Mm-hmm.
What made you think you didn't have everything? Was it gaps, or was it just a feeling, or was it just because the sheer number of invoices was so small?
Yes. Say yes to all of those.
Yeah.
I actually, that's a good point with the number of invoices. I thought 11 was really small for not only what I would have expected in any construction project, but the length of time that had already passed, there was only 11 invoices. So that was one of those feeling things that this just doesn't look right. The one invoice in the middle I knew was missing. The homeowner didn't realize it was missing, and the builder never said they didn't send it. But when you look at the numbers, you could pretty much trace the activity from one invoice to another, and then all of a sudden there was a huge gap where the numbers on either side did not mesh whatsoever. So when I pushed the homeowner to go back to the builder, they finally said, yeah, there's an invoice, but we don't have it. We can't give it to you. It was just not available for whatever reason. Yeah, and part of it was just a feeling too. The more I dug in, the more things that didn't make sense, I got the impression that it was obfuscation on purpose. It wasn't omissions. It wasn't errors. It wasn't some sort of mistake on behalf of the builder. Things were missing intentionally.
But it's a really interesting bit, though, isn't it? That gut feeling, which is only comes, I'm assuming, from your experience, to pick up on that gap.
And plus, having the construction background, specifically the residential construction background, a lot of things just didn't look right. And part of it was the naming of the line items that were in the invoices. Things just didn't make sense. And one of the most obvious ones, which I'm sure, actually, I think anyone would have noticed, but the homeowner didn't notice this, was that things like paint were invoiced and paid for before the walls were up. And you thought, okay, it's a material. Maybe you want to charge for materials early. But then on the invoice, you see the labor of walls being painted was charged, invoiced, and paid for before the walls were up. And most people are going to realize when you're building a house, the walls have to go up before you paint them. So there's little things like that were obvious. And then there's other stuff that was, I guess, hidden a little better. And you'd have to know what you're looking for to catch some of those.
No, it's good.
I think just to jump in as well, like I used to have a crossover in a similar industry, and I was just curious, Chandra, from your perspective, obviously there are some obvious accounting discrepancies that, that you found here that have sort of alerted those spidey senses. But then there's also, with this industry, a lot of, companies out there that maybe aren't that clued up on invoicing and aren't that accounting savvy. They might have started as a 1-2 person operation, and then they've become a little bit bigger. And was it obvious to you at this stage that this wasn't just poor business practice and that there was something afar, or were you investigating towards them and also giving a bit of that benefit of the doubt as well?
Yeah, I'd say when I started, because I was going in with, oh, this is simple, it's just 11 invoices, we'll be fine. I was giving the builder the benefit of the doubt that, okay, it could be just sloppy, laziness or whatever. But the more I dug in, I could see that there was effort put into misdirecting the homeowner. So they had to put extra work in to obfuscate some of what was happening, which doesn't tell me someone who's sloppy. It would have been a sloppy entry to start with, and that would have carried all the way through, not changed as we're going. With the first bit of OSINT, that solidified that this was more intentional rather than just laziness or not knowing what you're doing, was the length of time that the builder has been in business and in business doing apparently larger projects. So, if you've been in business and done the same thing for about 14 years, you really should have a handle on a small project like this. Like I say, the house was less than 1,500 square feet. It was actually, I think, 1,100. It's a single story, no basement. It wasn't that fussy. I mean, we used to make jokes that the Amish could have put it up in a weekend, and this took 3 years. So, yeah, the builder should have known better.
Thanks for that. It's really interesting.
Okay, so we're going to jump into, before we look at the actual OSINT, we're going to jump into the persons of interest that were involved in this. So we have the homeowner who had the house fire. They got in touch with their insurance company, and we'll keep an eye on them. I'm not going to name them by person either. The insurance covered the rebuild and put the homeowner in touch with a public adjuster who was familiar with fire-damaged residential homes. The public adjuster put the homeowner in touch with a general contractor / consultant. Now we'll come back later as to why this person has 2 names or 2 titles. The general contractor then put together a tender or a bidding package. So anyone who's not familiar with construction tenders, what the consultant or general contractor would have done in this case is basically documented everything that had to be done. So in this case, it's a house of this size, this material, et cetera, all the details, prepare this package, issue the package to the public or list of preferred vendors. And then those vendors would then bid on this project. they'd come back and say, I can do it for this price and this time. This one would say, I can do it for that price at this time. Those packages would come back, and ideally, the general contractor would have a predetermined structure as to how the winning bid is selected. So that is a normal bidding process, and I will say that did not happen. What happened is, in this tender process, the documentation stated that the insurance company was supposed to provide at least 2 bidders. The public adjuster was supposed to provide at least 1 bidder, and the general contractor was going to provide 1 bidder. So that should have been 4 bids. What actually happened was that the general contractor, I'm going to say, fabricated 2 bidding, 2 bid submissions, and they were very, very, very thin. Normally it's a package that would be submitted. This was actually a sheet of paper with a couple of line items and some amounts. That was it. And there was 2 of them. So the 2 from the insurance never happened. The 1 from the public adjuster never happened. There was a mystery bidder from the general contractor. And then there was the winning bid from the general contractor. He came with his subcontractors, and he was actually 100 kilometers away from the job site. So this was another, moment there. You have a $1 million project, and the only contractor, the only 2 bids that came in a 100-kilometer radius were these 2 guys, and the one guy who won was 100 kilometers away. It just didn't make any sense. But that was a separate issue. Fine. If that's the guy who won, then everybody was fine with that. The other thing we'll look at on here is that the insurance gave all the money, or routed the money through the public adjuster. The public adjuster was the one who issued the funds to the general contractor for his part in this project. We'll come back to it later, but that money that routed to him was a lump sum check, and that's important later. The other monies were sent from the public adjuster to the builder. And we'll come back to that as to why that was a little suspect as well later on in the slides. So hold on, I'm losing my voice already here. So the sources that I looked at, these are only the relevant ones that actually had some decent information, were basic Google searches, social media. There was a ton of information from LinkedIn, which is really good. There was various websites from the persons of interest, from industry experts, and from the employers of the persons of interest. There was online reviews, but there's one in particular that was extremely helpful. There was a variety of directories and registries. In particular, there was a builders directory for Ontario, and there's Ontario business registration directory. I also contacted a number of sources in person, by phone call and emails, and there's also an on-site visit to the house to see what was going on. Are we good for questions right now, or I'm just going to pop into the first timeline?
Yeah, no, I've definitely got some questions, but if anyone wants to ask any questions in the chat at any point as well.
You always have questions.
Yeah, I've got loads, but yeah, if there's anyone who's got any questions in the chat, then let us know. I'll read them out on your behalf. Okay. But yeah, I'm always fascinated by the world of OSINT. It is not my area of expertise. As anyone who's joined before, they know that that's what Dave is here to provide, is that very much that expertise in the OSINT world. But the online reviews, I'm just so curious about those, and I'm sure they were a treasure trove of, of information.
Yeah, I was really lucky on that one. It just, I will allude to it later, but that online review not only named the company that 2 of these people worked for, but it named them by name. It didn't just say, the project manager, and then I had to piece together who the project manager was. It actually named the 2 people, which was perfect because it put a nail in the timeline as to when these 2 people knew each other. And that was key to establishing that there was possible collusion.
Yeah.
And there's I just went blank, but none of this was disclosed to the homeowner, that the people knew each other ahead of time. And there was a few lies that came out of that. So that was, I was so happy when I saw that.
It's piqued my interest because I'm
Yeah.
not sure. I'm sure there's so many equivalents out there, but in the UK we have like Checkatrade. But even there are other websites where, the industry of construction, especially at this level, where you're not at all levels, but especially at this level, is around your reputation. So if you do a bad job for someone and then they leave an online review, that can really cripple your business because no one wants to hire someone who's caved your roof in. So they're often taken down very quickly, I think, is what I'm saying. If you get a bad review as a builder, you'll do it. We'll come around, we'll fix it tomorrow, we'll sort it out because they need that. So I'm just curious that they were still up and you were able to get something from those.
Well, this review was actually a favorable review. I was a little surprised at that, but it was singing their praises about how well they had done. I couldn't pull out the details of the project they worked on. I believe it was a residential one, and I believe it was a renovation.
Right.
And that's also key because when we look at the timelines, a lot of the experience of these of the builder and the contractor is in the renovation field, not house rebuild from the ground up. And those are two very different skill sets for those. But yeah, they only had one review where they sung their praises, and there was pretty much crickets for the rest of everything else, which was also telling in itself that if you've been a builder for 14 years and you've got one review from when you worked at some third-party company, okay, you might not be as good as you say you are.
Yeah, what we see a lot of is that is a really good point, I think, and a good tip to take away. Obviously, if you're doing OSINT and you're thinking about reviews, if it's all positive, that's like kind of curious. But then also if it's very, very sparse, then that's also really telling. Like you say, you can infer some interesting things there. But I think also there was another question I had and it's gone from my mind, but it's fine. I'll let you carry on. It will come back to me and I'll interrupt you when it comes back.
No worries. Okay, so the first, wait till that pops up. There we go. The first, I will zoom in, so don't worry about not being able to read that. The first timeline we're going to look at is the actual timeline around the house fire and the construction period there. So if I zoom in here, there we go. So we had the house fire. Again, these dates are all changed, so I'll just use the dates that are on here. We have the house fire in late summer. Soon after, a public adjuster is assigned from the insurance company. The public adjuster then recommends the general contractor. And I keep saying recommends because when he was challenged later on, he denied this thoroughly. But there's emails to say that, hey, you should go talk to this guy. So after the general contractor was brought in, there was a structural engineer hired. They did the drawings and 2 site inspections. Then the request for tender process, that process where the package was supposed to be sent out, bidded on by the general population of contractors and then brought back in, that lasted a whole 3 weeks, and I still don't think it actually happened. But the process was done. The winning bidder was now in the picture. That person assigned a project manager to the project. Demolition started literally about 3 days later. And then boom, we got invoice number 1. And invoice number 1 ended up being about 30% of all the funds that were dispersed. It was a pretty hefty first bill, given that all that was done literally by that point was that the building was knocked down. A burnt up, messed up building was knocked down. So soon after getting the invoice, a little more work was done, and then we had crickets. Nothing was happening from October till March. Can you see my mouse? Yeah. So for this period here, not a whole lot was happening. Soon after the first large check was issued, the construction stopped, and then the general contractor disappeared. Now, keep in mind, this general contractor, their responsibility was to oversee the entire project from start to finish. We're basically a few months in, and he got a lump sum, I will stress that, lump sum check for $17,000 from the public adjuster, and then disappeared. Nobody heard from this guy again. The work site continued to be very quiet, and then boom, there's another 3 more invoices. There was a little bit of work done, but not enough to warrant the 3 invoices. The construction was still kind of slow, and then there was further damage to the house due to builder negligence. So then work had to be redone. They had to renegotiate with the insurance company. The insurance company covered that repair as well. And then work finally started up again. Where am I here? After that damage was done. As soon as construction started again, this is a really interesting thing. The public adjuster, we're now several months into this project. The public adjuster said, oh, by the way, can I have a copy of the contract? I haven't seen anything yet. So he's already issued a great amount of funds in the terms of what, four invoices, and the contractor, actually 4 invoices, and the general contractor got money, and this guy hasn't seen the contract yet. So soon after that, actually, I don't think he ever did get the contract, but that's separate. Shortly after that, there were 3 more invoices issued. The project manager left his employer, and then the builder now named himself as the project manager. 4 more invoices went out, and then construction stopped again. So by the time that construction stopped over here, 67% of the scope had been completed, but 87% of the funds had been dispersed. So the homeowners already overpaid by 20%. At this point, things are falling apart between them. Nothing happened for months. The homeowner tried to do mediating, I guess, with the builder. That went nowhere. The homeowner then went to the public adjuster, and they said, that's not our problem. Go talk to somebody else. Maybe you should talk to the general contractor. That's when they realized that the general contractor had disappeared. And several months later, the homeowner just said, that's it. I'm done with everybody. I'm canceling all the contracts. And they actually took over the project and finished it far more efficiently than the builder did. But at that point, that's where, close to when I was brought in, was year 3 of this entire ordeal for the homeowner. Now I'm just going to go back. There's a few other things on here. You'll notice I have a note on the project manager skill set. I did do a background check on this guy, and he seems fine, but none of his training or experience made him qualified to be a project manager on a project of this sort. And I think that's partially why he left. He just left and just said, I've had enough with this. And when asked, he was rather evasive as to his reasons for leaving. But he wasn't qualified for that anyways. I think that was the only note. Yeah, that's the only note I had on here. So that was the 3 years of the building issues. We are now going to look at the builder timeline. Okay. So in here, this was the, oops, there we go. So this is the builder I looked into, and LinkedIn was fabulous for filling in a lot of gaps on this. So we're showing, I'll just scoot down here. You'll see about a 7-year window here. It's about 14 years in total, but this is the first 7 years. The builder worked at various construction companies. So I've made up some names here. There's ABC Contractors, worked there for a while. And then according to his LinkedIn, he also worked at DEF Contractors. During the same period, this is where I found that, where's my mouse? The online review that specified that this person was working at a specific company, actually Restorations R Us, and was doing a specific task, and it happened to be linked to the same insurance company. Not that I'm pointing fingers at the insurance company, but they just kept popping up all over the place. So the builder was at least at that company for that one job. Later on their LinkedIn profile, they did say, yes, I worked at Restorations R Us as a manager. And then after leaving that place, I went to JKL Renovations. So it's all restorations and renovation type work, plus this other business, DEF Contractors, I think he actually owned or had a partnership in. His work history continues, and What's in blue is the company that is referenced in the actual job for this house. So he claimed that he worked for XYZ contractors, and that was a partnership. The business structure was a partnership. The claim was that he worked there before the business was actually registered, which was several months later. They also said they worked for XYZ Contractors, Inc. So it's the same name. One's a partnership, one's a corporation. There's also mismatch as to when they worked there versus when the business was registered. But either way, there's two businesses registered with the same name, except one's a corporation and one's a partnership. Both of them, once they were registered, have stayed in existence. This one is still open and running as well. Now, if we go down here, you'll see let's see, 7 years, sorry, GEH Inc. This is another business associated with the builder. This is all overlapping timelines here. That business specialized in condo and high-rise construction, which we'll link to a bit later. The business was opened, it was closed, and then reopened under a different business number, but the same business name. And according to their LinkedIn, they did work there for a while. I think they were actually an owner, but on their LinkedIn, they said, I'm a project manager and an operations manager, and then I left that place. That will come into play. We'll come back to why it's important that he was linked to that company as well. I'll go back here. You'll see this note over here about the contract version. The actual contract used for this job was from a company that actually designs contract templates for construction projects. They're an industry regulated body, and the contract is used by the industry. The version that the builder used was from 2008, which kind of links back that he was in this type of business at the time, but that contract became obsolete prior to 2020, and he was still using that contract. So we have a bit of an issue where the contract used was no longer valid because it didn't meet the current regulatory regulations or requirements in the industry, but he was still continuing to use it. So we have an obsolete contract. The other side of it, which we'll delve into a bit later, is that it was a contract designed for like developers, for subdivision developers, not for single family homes. So it was the wrong contract for the job, and it was also obsolete and not valid. So fun stuff. Any questions on that before I go to the consultant? Okay.
Chandra, I'm going to ask my normal question. You know what's coming. It's going to be about timelines.
Yes.
My little pet subject, as you know. It's interesting, this story. It's a small amount of invoice, but there's a whole world of detail. Do you think without a timeline, you could really explain it in such clarity?
Oh, no. That's an absolute no, because when I first started digging, I approached it from the normal OSINT. It's like, oh, here's some information, here's some information. And because it was so far back, like I usually don't get 14 years worth of information. But when I started comparing, say, the LinkedIn information from the business registries and the online reviews, and there's also some of the companies, they posted data on, not data, they posted information on their websites as media releases. So I got a lot of stuff and the dates were not matching up. There's a lot of overlap, there were gaps. So I finally just had to do it in a timeline so I could just keep it straight. And that's where I started seeing, oh, we have overlap, we have weirdness, you know, this doesn't match up, this doesn't match up. And yeah, there's no way I could have seen this without doing a full timeline.
And the other question, you know, I'm gonna ask you as well. How do you do your timelines? Because I've never met a product yet that does it nicely.
Well, I was actually tempted to show an altered version of my original. I did it in Excel, and I did it the hard way. What I did was I squished the columns and did a column for every month of every year. So I had 14 times 12 columns. And then as I found information, I colored in the timelines that matched. So he said, you're working from here to here. I colored that in. And then this piece of evidence says something else. I colored that in. So I had row after row after row for each source to map it out. And it was really ugly. It was really awkward. Incidentally, this timeline is still in Excel, but I actually, if anybody wants the link on how to do this, it was a great resource. You actually just enter in all your dates with the label, and it will automatically graph it like this.
Yeah,
so
sure.
I did alter it so things lined up, obviously, because I wanted certain things to line up together. But yeah, this is still in Excel. And as I enter stuff, it'll automatically readjust the timeline and fit stuff in. And then I just moved it so it was readable afterwards.
No, I'm sure that there's a lot of people would be interested in that.
Yeah, it was really cool. It was so much easier than what I was doing before. Like that was just, it was absolutely brutal. But this was really well. And literally you just enter each, like, for example, I've got each name of the company that he worked at and the business registries, and then put the date, and then it automatically sorts everything.
Yeah,
and I cleaned it up a little, but
straight away when you're showing that, it's made me think, well, actually in our OSINT product, which I know you've got, we need to build a timeline. We need to build, and we've got a hint of a timeline, but we need to build a proper timeline. We can just say these 5 bits of data, put them in a timeline, and do it as you've got here, because it looks good, and it gets the story across.
Yeah, it was a lot easier. But yeah, doing it manually, I still had to do it in Excel because, again, the oldest Intel I had was about 14 years back, and I was starting to draw it out, and that wasn't working because things were piling up. There was too much overlap in some areas, so yeah, I had to resort to something. The first few versions were very, very just ugly.
and I'm sorry, Toby, I'm going on so much. And if you had printed it, you would have filled the room behind you.
Yeah, I actually was up to 2 legal pieces of paper together, trying to draw lines across, and yeah, it was like a kindergarten exercise. It was not working.
Brilliant.
Well, plus, I had to still think of how was I going to get this into the report, because I couldn't hand in the scribbles that I had, so I had to get something readable that would actually work in the report. So,
brilliant. Caught me eye.
You'll see it on this one as well. There we go, consultant. This one didn't have as much. Hold on, let me zoom in. There we go. Didn't have quite as much information, but oddly enough, it started at the same time period, which I was quite surprised at. So this is the general contractor who disappeared 3 months after the project started. And they, in their LinkedIn, actually identified that they worked at that Restorations R Us company. Oddly enough, both the builder and the contractor said they worked at that company, but after the review, after the date of the review. So I just found it odd that if you get a glowing report online from a happy customer, why don't you acknowledge that you worked there? But I found that a little odd. But this person actually did say they worked there for a couple of years. Then they have a gap in their work history for 2 years. They started working at a different restoration company, another gap for 2 years. And what you see there, their entire work history is on restorations, not new home builds. The other thing is the companies that they worked for also listed all their training, and all their training was related to restorations. So this added to the fact, to the impression that this person was not qualified to be a general contractor. This is not the type of work that they worked on. But this is where it gets funny and weird. And I had to make up names here. I apologize ahead of time, but this is the best I could do while covering up the actual names. So after the house fire, Appleby Cat Services was hired as the general contractor. On this person's LinkedIn, they claim to work at ABC Claims, and that date happens afterwards. The business that was actually registered is Appleby Cat Claims, which is a sole proprietorship and was registered like a few days before the LinkedIn time slot in there. So we have Appleby Cat Services, ABC Claims, and Appleby Cat Claims, 3 different business names. Only one of them is registered. And another interesting part is that the public adjuster recommended this person as a general contractor 6 months before his business was registered. So it's like, how did you even know this person did this stuff? And how did you recommend them when the business didn't exist yet? So that was a little odd. The other naming issue was that this person was identified on the contract as consultant, but the contract specified that a consultant had to be an architect and or an engineer, and this person was neither, based on all the work history that they claimed and the work history that their employers said that they had. On his website, he identified himself as an insurance claim consultant or an insurance claim advocate, which is fine. Again, they didn't have any work history to substantiate that, and that's not what the contract said that their function was. To the client, though, this person said, "Hi, I'm the general contractor." So now, in the 3 short months that this person was on the project, they were a consultant, they were an insurance claim consultant, and they were also the general contractor. They actually did none of those jobs, but those are the 3 titles that went with them. So for a guy with such a short amount of history, he had some very interesting things going on. And I didn't point it out there, but that insurance thing there, that again, that's the same insurance company that was linked not only to that specific project that had the online review, but the company that they worked at regularly worked with this insurance company. I'm not going to say exclusively, but I'm going to say like 80% of the work went from that insurance company to that restoration company. So crosses over, not saying anything. Just saying it's curious, you know. Exactly. So if I overlay the builder and the consultant, not all of the history, but whoopsie, here we go over here. So we're going to put a few things together. So the builder is linked to, registered with, and has said he works for GEH Inc. This is the company that was registered, closed for a while, re-registered, and then still exists. So he's associated with that business. And at the time of the fire and until the present, that business is still open. Let me just go down. The same builder is also associated with XYZ Contractors as a partner, the business as a partnership, and the incorporated version. Both of those businesses were registered and were still in operation at the time of the fire and are still operating now. Then we have our consultant who has worked with this builder before, did not declare that, but has worked with the builder. He was hired soon after the house fire. He, on his own LinkedIn, claimed to work at a similar named company months later, and the business wasn't actually registered until after that. So a lot of weirdness there. That 3-month window is the time that he spent working on the project. He didn't actually facilitate anything. He wasn't the general contractor. He had no part in running the project. But 3 months, he got $17,000 and then disappeared. Don't know where he went. And it was not several payments. I'm still stunned by this. It was a $17,000 check. So I don't know how that happened, but that came from the public adjuster. I'm just saying. So was there anything else on that one? Yeah. So the 2 names I want you to remember are XYZ Contractors and GEH Contractors, because that comes up when we look at the findings. You'll see a little bit of a weirdness on that as well. So we're going to go into, got good time on this. I'm now going to go into the findings. This is basically a summary of all the stuff that came up. So we have undisclosed conflict of interest. 3 of these people work in a niche area, and their The companies they worked for worked with each other. Two of them worked at the same company at the same time, at least on one project together. And the insurance company was linked to all the companies that they associated with. In addition to that, the public adjuster actually worked at that insurance company for a short period. So he worked indirectly with them through other employers, but he also worked at that insurance company. Basically, none of this was disclosed to the homeowner, and that was a bit of an issue. If you've known each other for 14, 15 years, when you make a recommendation that, hey, you should work with this person, that recommendation falls apart if you don't say, I already know them from somewhere else. The bidding process, I don't think happened whatsoever. I say that there's proof of only one bid. Again, the bid package submitted was a sheet of paper with about 15 line items and one set of totals. That is not a bid submission. That's just a summary. And it looks like this is actually the only digital forensic work I did on this whole thing. I actually looked at the metadata on the two summaries that were submitted, and I'm pretty sure they were both created on the who would this been? The general contractor's computer at the same time, because the metadata did not look like it came from two different sources. So I didn't want to delve into that too much, but yeah, that just did not match. So it looked like two bids came in. I think there was only one, and I don't think it was an actual bid because they were already in collusion with each other. So the entire tender process, I don't think actually happened. And the fact that, again, it was $1 million job, there's got to be more than one builder in a 100-kilometer radius that would have been willing to come in and do this. I mentioned the builder was not licensed as a new home builder. That actually ended up, it was something I was hopeful for the owner, and it didn't pan out. I'll mention it a bit later, but as a new home construction, the homeowner would have been covered by the HCRA, which I'll cover in a minute. But unfortunately, this didn't qualify as a new home, so they missed out on that. Other anomalies in there were the business registrations with the consultant. So the public adjuster referred the consultant to the job 6 months before they were registered as a business. That person actually had 3 different business names referenced in the project, but only one of them was actually registered as a legal business. The person was also unqualified for the role as consultant as defined in the contract, because that required an engineer or architect. And they were also unqualified as a general contractor because that wasn't their background. Like, they had never held that role before, and that's not what they did. And the fact that the general contractor also changed their title with the homeowner several times, they kept referring to themselves as a different title. They also used 2 different emails. One was a Gmail, and one was it was linked to one of the company names, but I don't think it was the one that was registered. So that changed through the 3 months that they were there. The payments were still stunned by this. All of the payments were handled through the public adjuster from the insurance company, but the consultant who was supposed to be there for the entire length of the project got a lump sum payment 3 months in. So I don't know who was overseeing that. Nobody seemed to be concerned that this person got a $17,000 check and then disappeared. And the fact that the public adjuster was one issuing the checks to the builder, it was not noticed or did not appear to be a concern that the payments went to a different company partway through the project. So first the payments went to the builder's partnership company, and then partway through the payments changed and went to the incorporated company. And these are 2 separate companies. They happen to have similar names, but legally one of them was not tied to the project. So money just got funneled into a different location, and that did not get picked up by the insurance company, or they didn't care, and the public adjuster had to have noticed because they issued the check. So findings number 3, the contract. I mentioned that the contract used was from 2008, became obsolete prior to 2020, so it shouldn't have been used. It's also designed for developers who are developing subdivisions or multi-home complexes. It's not for single one-off residential construction. That in itself is one thing, but when you actually read the contract, there are 3 parties in this contract. There's a contractor, there's a consultant, and there's the developer. In this case, the developer was the client as their role. The contract favored the contractor and the consultant and basically left no way out for the client. They had no way of resolving construction delays, payment issues, any discrepancies in the materials used. They had nothing in that contract that would support them. Now, this is the only place where I let the public adjuster off the hook because they didn't see the contract until 6 months in. But they issued payments for the contract, but they never got a copy. So I'm kind of on the fence with that one. The contract, the role of contractor in the contract, which is fulfilled by the builder, this is where those 2 companies came in. They identified themselves as GEH contractors in one part, and then as XYZ contractors in another part of the same contractor, of the same contract. What I'm thinking is that this builder has used this template for decades. He used it at one of the companies he worked at, which was GEH Contractors, and in a cut and paste missed one of the replacements. And that's why the 2 companies are listed. But that also causes issues with the contract because now the contract is with 2 companies. And again, nobody seemed to catch that. And then the last little weirdness, what I was hoping for the homeowner, the builder proclaimed themselves as a custom home builder. But for that to be legal in Ontario, you have to be registered with HCRA, which is the Home Construction Regulatory Authority. And they were not and have never been under any company name ever associated with a company that was registered. So I was hoping that the house would qualify as new construction, but because it was 95% rebuilt, they did not qualify. So they lost all of the power that they would have had under the HCRA to fight this guy because it didn't technically qualify. So he said he was a home builder. I guess he's not in violation of the HCRA because I don't know. He's more of a renovator. Didn't know where to leave that one. So that's basically it. I got good timing on that one.
Yeah, great timing there. Thanks so much, Chandra, for walking us through that. And if anyone's got any questions, now's your time to sort of pop them in the chat and we can finish off with those. But I just wanted to say, yeah, wow, there's so much to that. And I think my initial reflections, firstly, is like, from where you start with a box of papers and nothing to go from, and then building that initial sort of financial investigation, how important it is to follow the money to begin with and sort of get those breadcrumbs of, okay, this is a bit weird, this is definitely wrong, this could be a mistake, or this might be suspicious. That like ignites your gut, and then you're like, right. And then moving it through the OSINT process that we saw was amazing.
That was invaluable. That really
was. It's really interesting, like to see how much, even like you say, maybe you play it down a little bit, but like even just basic sort of OSINT stuff, like starting with Google, finding reviews, going on LinkedIn, cross-referencing, because people often think they're much cleverer than they are, especially in these types of crimes. And you know, it sounds like a simple thing where, yeah, okay, maybe I've written the wrong company name down, or I've used an old one because it was so similar, but then actually have they actually found and replaced this, like you say, and is it then opening a whole other can of worms to look into? But I think the thing that was definitely the biggest takeaway from the chat and the participants, and we'll definitely get the link to send over, was how valuable those timelines were, because there's so much going on. And you can kind of see, you know, you've got a feel for the victim in this case, and cases similar to it, because it may seem somewhat obvious when you find those really, you know, egregious kind of accounting double invoices. Like
Yeah.
that seems really obvious once you found it. But if you were just going through this process and you've got people coming in and out your house and there's been a fire and you just want to get things sorted out and you're getting invoices for paint and doors, you can see how people get so quickly wrapped up in that.
Yeah.
But when you put it in,
they were in a very emotional state. I mean, I feel bad for a number of reasons. Yeah, they had the house fire, and as I said, only one room was affected by the fire, but delays from the insurance company actually caused the entire structure to be covered in mold. And when I say covered, I mean like a foot thick of mold. It was disgusting. So the whole thing had to come down. So that was the first delay, was the year in that. So they're already stressed out and they're displaced this entire time as well. So then once the construction got going, they were just happy that anything was happening.
Yeah.
And with no construction background and with an inherent trust in the process, because now this is a trick with fraudsters. I'm not saying everyone here was a fraudster, but this is a trick with that, is that everybody was recommended. Oh, I recommend this person. Oh yeah, trust me, use this person. Trust me, use this person. And it just took another weight off the homeowner of what to do, because they were being put into a position where they had to make construction related decisions.
Yeah.
While dealing with the house fire and the insurance and everything else. And it made no sense. So of course they stepped in and said, no, trust me, go to this person. Trust me, work with this person.
Yeah. And I think when also you've got a insurance company involved, you kind of, I don't know, maybe sort of think, okay, things are happening now and the way that they should be. You kind of have that element of trust, which obviously has been completely violated here.
Yeah.
There's a question that's come in just now from Mike, which might be a nice one to end on, which is around, following this investigation, have any legal proceedings been made or any referrals to law enforcement?
That one was really interesting. And I think I mentioned to Toby earlier when we were talking a month or so back about this. When this started, the issue was a civil issue. It was, I owe this amount. No, you owe this amount. And the homeowner did go to seek legal advice as to how to deal with it. They then went to a mediator, which also bailed on them. I couldn't believe that. And by the time I got brought in, it was still a civil matter. So they did go to a lawyer civilly to handle the dispute of how much was owed. By the time my report was done, because I was asked to deal with a civil matter, everything to do with fraud was referenced as, by the way, this, then this. So half my report was on all of the background stuff that made it look like fraud. And then the rest of it had to do with the actual numbers. So at that point, I think on the lawyer's recommendation, it didn't go to law enforcement, mainly because they weren't pursuing a fraud case. It was still a civil matter. And incidentally, this is still before the courts. It hasn't been resolved yet. And honestly, the whole thing's just going to time out and then go away. This guy's not going to get charged for anything, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, well, I know we always wish to end on a maybe more of a happy note, but I think the work that we've seen is fascinating, and hopefully there are more and more reviews that come out and live on the internet.
Oh yeah,
in their name.
Everyone's got to put everything online, because I'm telling you, I don't think I've ever found so much stuff just through OSINT. I didn't have to do any interviews. I didn't have to really dig into anywhere. I didn't have to pay for any of the information. This was literally OSINT at its best. It was awesome.
Brilliant. Well, look, we're coming to the end of our time, but I'm sure we could speak about this particular investigation much longer. But yeah, we'll sort of wrap things up there. If anyone does have any questions, obviously you can see on the screen some. I was
going to say, Curtis, somebody asked about the link.
Yes.
So yeah, message me in LinkedIn. Where I found the information was actually a YouTube link from a lady who does amazing stuff with Excel. She's an absolute wizard with it. But I did save that link particularly because I knew somebody would ask about this during the webinar. So I'll just send the link If I had it handy, I could post it right now if I was super quick.
See if you can. If not, we'll send it out to
Hold
people
on,
post event.
Let's just see if I can do this.
But
Talk-
I think it's
Talk
Oh,
for a
sorry.
moment and
well, I was going to say, I think, you know, when everyone's got the link, they can share with us the most creative timelines, or the most
we go.
impressive timeline wins something. We'll come up with a prize
I
for
think
you.
we just found it. Hold on a second. Hold on.
We can hear
Oh
the
my
video.
God. Yeah, I can't shut up the sound off.
So we're definitely on YouTube now.
So sorry. Okay, let me just, I think this is it. I will put it in the chat. Can
That
I
chat-
access the chat from here?
No, but send it to. I can put it in the chat
Mm.
post event, so
Okay.
we can only
Yeah.
see the comments on the what we're on. But I think, yeah, we'll get the link onto this chat and we'll send it out to you individually as well, or you can reach
Yeah.
out to either Chandra or myself, and we'll get it
Yeah.
to you. But yeah, thank you very much, Chandra. Everyone has thoroughly enjoyed the presentation. Curtis, yeah, thanks. You know, yeah, when you know someone who's been a victim of fraud or worked on a fraud, you know how impactful these cases can be.
Yeah.
And when it's in your own home, you know, that's, you know, really, really upsetting. So
Yeah.
it's really great work, and from a professional standpoint, super interesting to see, but obviously, you know, also a really impactful case. So thank you for sharing that with us.
No problem. You guys ever want to go through the forensic accounting side? There's a whole hour on that one too.
I'm sure we do. I'm sure we do. Maybe that could be a part 2. I think that would
Okay.
definitely be interesting. I think we should do that. Thank you everyone for joining. Chandra,
you.
thanks. Dave, thanks as always. And yeah, we'll be back in no time with maybe part 2 of this from a forensic accounting perspective, I think.